Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Westworld. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we are picking up with Bernard, finding out what happened to him in the time he was gone. Basically, when he entered that other world. It's interesting because it's pretty much this essential robot heaven is kind of designed like Supernatural's original heaven, where basically everyone's got their individual heaven, like everyone's off on their own doing their own thing, which I thought was kind of a fascinating design. And it makes sense. It's just like, right, everyone else has created their own situation. We see the return of like Zach McLaren's character, which the timing is interesting because, like, right, his show Dark Winds is currently airing too, so like I thought that was kind of an interesting timing. But yeah, he's the one kind of leading Bernard through this. It's like, right, I can't help you. So also tells me the Teddy isn't that. So okay, so Bernard didn't bring Teddy back from that world. So what is up with the Teddy situation then? Once again, so it throws that whole thing of like, so what is that then? What is that Dolores situation? I don't know what that is, because I thought like maybe Bernard brought Teddy back, but we have no idea. Like the Dolores thing could be like all this stuff could be going down with everyone else's stories. Bernard, Maeve and Caleb's, their stories could already happened, and that Dolores' story is like way in the future, in the sense that like in the way aftermath of all the stuff that's going to go down this season. Maybe that's what's Dolores' story is, kind of the aftermath, maybe. I don't know. So, but it begs the question, like, okay, so the Teddy we saw isn't even the Teddy from that world, but it's like, it looks like, so that's why I'm confused. Like, what narrative has she been put in? Like, what is that place's circumstances? It has to have something to do with those flies. Like, she has to have some part. I'm like, that's why I'm like, maybe that is like well after the fact. Like, she has been put into this narrative that's taking place after all. I don't know. But Bernard spent those 7 years there, which those 7 years equate to like 7 millennia there, running through all the different possibilities. But he knows if he goes back, the possibilities he saw all ended with him dying, which is like, oh, not unless you stay here. And I even love that. It's like, yeah, it's kind of irrational. The fact is, you care about these humans so much. It's kind of like a rare flaw in our design that we actually grow to care about these humans, and you want to make sure that they survive, because to some extent, the direction Charlotte's taking everything, it kind of will be the extinction of the human race to some extent, because they will essentially be the new host, and what calamities kind of befall that, well, maybe only Bernard can see, because he's the one that's seen it. So I do like him being that literal kind of prophet to some extent. So it's interesting considering like what we have. Like we have like Dolores, a resistance fighter, in her own situation. We have Maeve, who's always been like the secret weapon amongst the hosts, and now Bernard, who knows the future. I mean, different possibilities. So he finally comes back, and I was like wondering where Stubbs was. Oh, Stubbs is like, hey, there you are, Bernard. Didn't bring me back a gift or a souvenir. He's like, good, because most times you like that eliminates half the scenarios, because some of those you are like requesting a postcard or something. It's like, oh, cool, you're back as a prophet now. And it's like, you could have cleaned the place up. He's like, yeah, I looked after you. You wanted me to leave everything exactly where it was. And I was like, yeah, that's why I thought something might have happened to Stubbs, considering how dirty the place is. It's like, no, I guess he's just been safekeeping the place all these years, so. But time to get back to work, and it's like, right, get the shovel. What shovel? Goes outside. Oh, there's the shovel. Let's drive. It's like, oh, I'm going to get this particular thing. It's like, yeah, you're going to settle for the tuna melt. He orders it. It's like, oh, but we have a means tuna melt. I'll settle for that. It's just like, huh. And I love that even at one point he's like, right, if I actually ordered the BLT, it'd completely fuck up the entire saving the world thing. He's like, no, it would just change. We'd be in a different variation of like things. So things are lining up. I mean, the moment he did all this, I was like, oh, he's full-blown Doctor Stranging this right now, isn't he? I was like, that's fascinating. That he's that's kind of a whole full-blown Doctor Strange situation going on here, and I love that. All the different possibilities he saw. I mean, granted, he didn't see them in a short amount of time. Doctor Strange did. He's seen them over the course of 7 years, 7 millennia, all the different scenarios, so that's just interesting. But the moment Bernard killed those guys, I was like, what? Why? What is that about? what are you doing? I didn't get it. And then they get picked up by someone after he shows them the maze. And I'm like, so that's the calling card of some group or resistance. And you're like, what's up with that? And then the moment we got to look at it, I was like, wait, why do I recognize it? I was like, it's Aurora Perrineau! Dude, this episode hit me with all the, oh my god, seeing all these certain actors, I'm like, oh, it's just a reminder that the show that I know them from best is not coming back. Like, Aurora Perrineau, it's like, oh, a reminder that there's no more, Prodigal Son. Oh, like, at least who appears to be the leader of their group. Oh, it's Daniel Wu. Oh, just a reminder that there's no more Into the Badlands. And then, like, Manny, I believe Manny's last name is, like, Montana. Seeing him, it's like, oh, cool, no more Good Girls. And it's like, I only need maybe one. It just, it hit me, like, 3 different actors from 3 different shows that are just, like, that were cut short. Not cut, well, one was definitely cut short, but the other 2 didn't get a chance to continue. But it's just, oh, God. I just got hit triple fold with that. You know, Manny had already popped up beforehand as Carver, but still, it was just like, it just like I love that. That was just an interesting situation. I love when they made it. Well, how she was able to convince him, because it turns out, hey, those people, they're host. They were trying to infiltrate your group, so it's like, okay, so why is Charlotte after this group? Well, it turns out this group is, I guess over the past couple years, they've become this resistance that I guess the world isn't really aware of. They've been fighting this secret war that the world doesn't realize they're being replaced. So, I mean, to be fair, Charlotte's, once again, the last number we saw in episode 2 was like 249. Granted, that number could be even higher now. No full telling who's a host and who isn't. To be fair, the only person who'd be able to tell is Maeve. She'd have a clearer and easier time, but yeah, that weapon's kind of off, that situation's off the board right now because she's kind of indisposed in Westworld with Caleb, which we'll get to later. But I love the whole thing with the lasers too. It's like, not going to warn me about the death lasers. Bernard's like, I knew she would. It's like, yeah, it also looks suspicious if I knew about the death lasers. Gotta appear not as a host because they don't like host. Because it's like, yeah, I can't really tell you I'm a host that's stopping other hosts from infiltrating your group. I mean, yeah, because the moment they find out, which I don't think they'd be able to easily detect. I don't think they had the means to, but probably not. If they were able to kind of send people to infiltrate their group, that must mean they don't. But Bernard's already a step ahead too, because, well, he knows the future. Like, if anything leads to them being suspected, he'll know how to kind of avoid that. Or maybe being suspected is all part of the plan. Like, everything has to go a certain way to keep it on one of these scenarios that's kind of laid out in front of him. So, but their whole situation is about finding a weapon, and I'm assuming the weapon is meant to counteract the flies. Everything that Charlotte has planned right now, I guess it's meant to counteract all of that. It's definitely going to be needed with the way things kind of played out in Westworld, but so that's kind of interesting. And Bernard knows exactly where this weapon is, and once again, you'd assume that's why Charlotte wants to infiltrate the group, because she's aware of this weapon that either it can destroy host or which. I'm sure Bernard wouldn't want to go down a lane where it would see the end of his species as well. But I'm assuming it's whatever it is, it's to stop Charlotte. But like I said, I'd assume it has to be something that can counteract the flies. But once again, Bernard also knows that this scenario ends with his death. So how that plays out, what that's all about, whether it's him sacrificing himself in the end, maybe he is not only the Doctor Strange of this, but he's also the Iron Man as well. So maybe that's kind of the correlation we're going to kind of potentially get in this regard. So it's going to be interesting to see where that storyline ends up leading us. But other than that, we have our whole situation in Westworld. And I love how meta that is. I mean, to be fair, this show has always been extremely meta with just like how things play out, especially in Westworld. But the fact is that, like, they're walking and Caleb bumps into a guy and Maeve's almost like, do not engage with him, because it's like, yeah, that's going to send you down a whole narrative subplot storyline. It's like, we're not about to do that. Then a can gets kicked towards him. Do not pick up that can. And you're like, oh, that's the new Dolores. Because it's like, yeah, because that would have set in a whole thing in motion. And it's like, I mean, also that Dolores situation kickstarted so much, because that Dolores situation is, I mean, William is is the reason why he became who he became on so many levels. But because we found out last season, a lot of William's issues were already buried deep inside of him. Just he used Westworld as kind of an excuse to be more of himself to some extent. But it's like, yeah, that's kind of what jump-started that whole Dolores situation, led to him becoming the William that he is today to some extent. And then it has to be awkward for me because the moment you walk into, like, was it the Butterfly Club, you're like, yeah, it's your old stomping ground. And it's like I said, the layers of, yeah, it's literally the same narrative with a new skin on top. And even I'm like, is that a little weird? I mean, I guess, like, maybe most of these people, I mean, to be fair, most of the people, everyone from then died, didn't they? There were no survivors from Westworld, were there? I don't remember now. Like, Charlotte was like one of the survivors at the very, there was a handful, but I know Charlotte, well, as we know, Charlotte wasn't one of the survivors, but yeah, pretty much everyone else died during the massacre. So, but I love the layers upon layers of just like, she's like, well, my line delivery was so much better, and you're just like, oh, it's got to be, because even it's just, oh, it's got to be so weird. For one, she's seeing her own replacement. She's never been in that situation. I'm like, this is like, Maeve's never been replaced. Like, she was there for Clementine's replacement, but she was never replaced to my recollection. Do correct me. But it's like being on the other side of that, outside of like the narrative that was written for you. But also, it's like, it's been 7 years. I guess there's no Lee to help with any new narrative. So you're like, it's a pretense. It's just meant to be a facade. So recycle the same narrative. Anyone that would have known it is dead anyway, because I'm assuming those will be the people who died 7 years ago were the regulars. So they're dead. So this narrative is new to everyone else. So that's interesting. But also, things playing out is what Maeve was hoping for, and she meets the new Hector, and it's like, yeah, but he's just a shabby imitation of someone I know, because the Hector she knows, like, yeah, because we're basically seeing the new versions of everyone, because everyone else's, like, bodies were, like, destroyed last season, so, like, there are no more potential copies of those bodies anymore. I'm sure you probably couldn't, they're programmed somewhere so you can make them, obviously, but, yeah, everyone else's cores were just, to our knowledge, were kind of destroyed as well. So these are just new people who are imitations. You know, once again, it's almost like, this layer of like, oh, it's kind of a Westworld reboot, which this is a reboot, more remake, reimagining. But yeah, these are the new versions of them. These slightly not as cool and good versions of these characters we've come to know. It's like, there's so many layers to that. Like I said, just the narrative speaking of, oh, you're just recycling the same narrative, with just a new skin, you know. I love that. Which, you know, I think some people would make that argument in some regards. I wouldn't say that, but I think some people can make that same regard about certain reboots and remakes. I think so. There's like another added layer to that. That's just where my mind goes. I think that's interesting, but they go underground, and I was like, okay, by pretending to be the dead bodies and the behavioral things, and as Maeve's looking through things, she's like, this doesn't make any sense. There's nothing being controlled here. And then all of a sudden things start popping off, and we see the new Dolores, and I was like, and even Kayla's like, Dolores? It's like, no. And Maeve's like, I think she was going by, if our memory serves, she was going by Wyatt at the time. And I was like, wait, they're not doing it, and Maeve confirms they are doing it. I was like, that's disgusting. They included the Westworld massacre as part of the narrative story. Because I was like, why are there people down here? Why are guests down here? Secret narrative. What's going on? Oh, cool. They're reenacting that, which I'm like, that was only 7-ish years ago. And I'm like, that seems like a fresh wound, but no one's really complaining. Everyone's kind of enjoying it and stuff. And you're like, that's kind of twisted. But then again, I'm like, well, to be fair, reenactments are a thing. It's like, was it no different from like crime shows that like true crime shows that like reenact relevance? I mean, crime dramas in general that are like based on true stories that are reenactments. But I don't know. I was like, I had to think about that. I was like, yeah, I mean, stuff gets like reenacted all the time for, you know, true crime stuff. So I'm like, is that really any different? I was also saying like, yeah, we tend to reenact history, you know, those tend to be like some of the like darkest times in history that we're just kind of reenacting to historical entertainment to some extent. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's just an extra layer, but I'm like, that just feels weird. Like, especially because it's also because it adds an extra part to it because it's like you're literally in the same place where everyone died and you're reenacting the massacre that took place here. That's where I'm like, I think that's what really kind of throws me for a loop there. I'm like, that's actually sick and disgusting a little. Quite a bit. So, but once again, I guess that's kind of the point of it, the thrill of it, because I think even William made a joke about it last year in some last episode, and some people kind of like it's just, but I guess it's like, right, you get your thrills, your kicks some way, you kind of, it does kind of suck that, like, yeah, Caleb doesn't have to worry about any of this, but despite everything, Meg still has to be careful because literally any of those weapons can still hurt her because she's a host, and that severely sucks, so. But they go a layer deep, and so we figured out, they've already to the audience, it seemed already pretty clear what the flies did, but now we're kind of getting a better understanding of how they operate. Because I thought the flies themselves were being technically programmed, like they were little robots, almost like little drones, but it seems like they're regular flies, which I could be mistaken, but it appears that they're just regular flies infected with a specially engineered black goo. They infect the flies with those, and then those. So I don't know whether it's like the goo is like the nanites and machinery, and then it infects the flies and controls the flies, and then the flies end up infecting people. So do they infect you with the goo, or the flies themselves being controlled, and they spray you with the goo, which also controls you? Like, I wonder like how deep that goes. It might be a combination of all, like that mechanic of it. I'm not completely sure about. Like, I don't know if they just spew the goo on you, infect you that way, or or even the fly still being controlled by the goo. But obviously, the moment like Caleb was near the glass, they immediately reacted to him. It's like, yeah, they react specifically to humans, and then we see like them kind of getting trained at. It's like, are they hosts? And Maeve's like, I don't think they are. So we saw that guy who Hale got, I want to say last episode, we saw him, and they're being trained and makes them kill themselves. And you're like, that's horrifying. That's horrible. So you're like, that sucks. So at the same time this is happening, I do love the cut back and forth. Because at one point he sees Frankie there. I was like, no. I was like, that's messed up that Charlotte would do that. But we find out, jumping ahead a little bit, that I love that twist where it's like, I was like, oh, they must have gotten captured. I was like, once again, time is never what you, and then maybe this show's kind of messing with you like that because you're like, oh man, time is never what you think it is. And once again, like how and I think that's kind of what they're playing into the William storyline, William and the Man in Black, like storylines being told the way it was. You would never suspect that William was that guy. So that was kind of a neat twist to that. So you almost thought like, oh man, like all that stuff already happened. They already caught Frankie. No, they used her as bait. So it makes you wonder where the others hosts. Like Maeve didn't realize that Frankie wasn't Frankie until like the door was open. 'Cause I guess like the doors blocked her ability to sense. So the moment the doors were open, so it makes you wonder that guy who killed himself. I'd assume that Charlotte would still need him in his position, but maybe he's in a position she doesn't need anymore. So either that is the real him and he's already been replaced by a host. Well, she made the whole point that they don't need to be, so I'm assuming she's just controlling him. To be fair, William killed that guy and ended up replacing him when he like the vice president or something like that. So last episode, so I think it's a different situation and circumstances. So. But like I said, I love that cut back and forth because Frankie was trying to get in contact with her dad. And at first I was like, wait, is Iwade, like, is she a host herself? But it's like, no, they ended up killing Carl. I love that twist because, like, you knew something was wrong immediately. Frankie was like, oh, so teach me the moves. He's like, what moves? She's like, the moves you taught Bear. He's like, when we get to the safe house, I was like, he doesn't remember. What the And then, like, she saw the blood on the bear. I was like, he's been replaced. I was like, that fast. Man, that's fast. Man, this is scary because it's just like, you don't know, I mean, that's always been a part of this show, but I mean, I think they're kicking it in an overdrive this season. You have no idea who's already been replaced. That's all the complicated rub of it all. But, yeah, like, because the moment Frankie was in the closet, I was like, what happened? Like, did she not get there in time? Like, what happened? But she did, and it got away, but the whole point was to trick Caleb. It's always been about Caleb. So I guess they were perfecting this because maybe, just maybe, Charlotte needs her outliers because he's like he's a very important outlier. I mean, I guess it's because he was part of Dolores's plan and now Charlotte's hijacking parts of that to do her own thing. She already came up with her plan, and maybe that also included Caleb even back then. So coming after him now is because of that. She needs him. Maybe it also has to do with some of the stuff that him and Maeve were up to in between that time skip. But because we know he is this outlier predisposed to violent tendencies and stuff, so maybe Charlotte needs those that violence in him, like to be kind of like just like Dolores needed him. Like maybe Charlotte does in almost a similar regard of like maybe she needs him to be once she can get him under her control, it's like he can be the one that kind of leads her charge against changing the entire human race. I have no idea. But it's sad that like he got tricked and he's being infected and May's going toe to toe with William. It's like, which, hey, I'm not the same William we thought it was. Granted, as we found out last episode, the real William is still alive. It's just got some host copies running around. So probably more than one, because that one didn't look like he was shot. It looked like that was a new one that just came right out. So probably got multitudes of those just out and about. Or maybe it was the same one. He just didn't seem like he had the gunshot wounds that Maeve had given him. Nevertheless, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Finding out what's going to happen to Caleb, how Maeve's going to find a way out of this if she can. And can she even help Caleb at this point? Because there's no, like, cure to those flies, right? Or to that infection, like the parasites. There's no cure to that right now. And then everything with Bernard and Stubbs and this resistance of some sort that they started. Once again, it's like the fact is that their symbol is the maze is kind of interesting. I mean, that symbol's been so ingrained in the show since the beginning. It's been part of Ford's design, so it's just kind of interesting to see it kind of brought back in some group who, do they even understand the significance of it? I mean, maybe they understand the significance of it, and that's why it's so important, because it is a battle, because it's so important to it's ingrained in the host, it's a part of them, and now it's like, being used, to be like, right, our symbol of fighting them is their symbol to some extent. Maybe that's the explanation for that. Either way, I'm very, very excited, like I said, to see where all this ends up taking us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.